I know you have only experienced Stanford, but through your close connection, how are you able to compare and contrast the two schools? And what are some things that Harvard does really well that Stanford could do better? This is just not to trash talk. This is not a segment to only trash talk Harvard.
No, I mean, both Harvard and Stanford are fantastic schools, as are like so many of the other schools. But I feel like both Harvard and Stanford are so different in like so many different ways. One is, of course, the way the classes are taught, where at HBS, everything is case-based. And you can argue whether case-based is the best way to teach every single class. I personally don't think so. I mean, not like I'm an authority on this or anything, but just going through my first year at Stanford, I feel like there were so many classes which I was like, I'm glad that this is not a case-based class and this is a lecture style, or like something else, or like lead labs, which we did. Mm-hmm. Right? Sure, it was like case-based in some way, but also so different. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like much smaller groups with 5 other people where you're just testing different leadership styles. Maybe like HBS has a version of that, I'm not sure. But I feel like, I don't think, personally, in my opinion, not every class should be case-based. So I feel like Stanford's better in that sense, that they try out different teaching methods for every single class. Second, I feel like the way it's different is entrepreneurship is like super, super high focus at GSB. And sure, HBS also does that, but I think Stanford does like a more focused effort when it comes to entrepreneurship. Yeah. Sure, like some of it is like a natural advantage because we're in Silicon Valley. We have super close access to VCs, startup founders who can like come and talk all the time, like all these brown bag lunch and learns that we keep having all the time, which I feel like just makes gives you the opportunity to meet so many cool people who start their own companies. HBS is a much bigger class, which is both a pro and a con. I think the pro is your network, instead of being 400 at Stanford, is 1,000 people at HBS, which means you get to meet a lot more people than you get to meet at Stanford. But at the same time, I feel like because we're a smaller class, it's easier to form closer connections with people in the class. At this point, I'm sure both you and I know the vast majority of the class, which I'm not sure is true for HBS, especially because of the section thing that they have, which is throughout your first year, you're literally taking every single class
with the same
set of people, which we just had sections in our first quarter.
Yeah.
And even in the first quarter, it's not like I was taking every single class with my section.
Yeah.
There were so many classes that
counting the base classes I took base.
Yeah, because it was based on levels, right?
Exactly.
So yeah.
I can't imagine having 1,000 people in the class. I feel like 400, to me, even though like we've for the most part met everyone, still feels like a lot.
Yeah.
But then in terms of like brand recognition, do you still feel like that's true, that HBS is more internationally recognized than Stanford at this point?
It really depends on like, I remember reading this on Reddit, and I'm picking this term up from Reddit, which is like layman prestige, which is like prestige amongst common people who are not necessarily part of the business school world or have gone to business school, etc. Let me elaborate on that. If you go back to India and mention to any random person who does not know how business schools work, who does not know how like careers after business school work, and tell them that I'm going to Harvard, they will know that you're going to one of the best schools in the world. Yeah. If you tell them you're going to Stanford, sure, they will know it's a great school, but they will still think of HBS or Harvard as a much stronger brand compared to Stanford. However, if you go into like the circles where a lot of business school people are there, Stanford is a more exclusive brand. It's because international intake per country is lower, which means that someone from Stanford, if they were to go back to India, they would be one of the 1 or 2 people going back from Stanford that year to India, which means that you are a lot more exclusive than 20 people who are going from HBS back to India. So like the brand amongst the general masses for HBS is a lot stronger. But amongst like the network that matters a little more for us, I would say Stanford is looked at as a more exclusive brand, which opens a lot of doors. Because in some ways it makes the competition slightly lower because you're not competing with like 20 other people who have graduated from the same school, but like just one other person. Yeah, so I feel like that's how I would think of the brand prestige.
Sure, there's like an asterisk. Like yes, Harvard is more widely known by everyone in the world, but asterisk, depends on the circles that you're in.
I remember I was talking to my aunt, my mom's sister, when I got through, and I told her I got through Stanford, I'm going to Stanford. She was like, oh, that's great, but what about Harvard? And I was like, yeah, I mean, Stanford is a great school too, and Stanford's, like, for me, Stanford's, I think, better than Harvard. She was like, oh, you should think about that decision, and Harvard is more popular, Harvard is more well known, and I was like, yeah, I mean, these are factors that matter too, which is how well known your brand is. But like for me, I think for the brand of Stanford matters in the places where I want it to matter, and that's why I made the decision.